How y'all feeling? Y'all feeling good? Make some noise.
Come on, y'all. How we feeling? Man, the energy is going. You know how to represent day 2, final day of the conference. I also got my bag, Futureland exclusive. All right, putting on with my boy Chad Porter in the house. Trey, how are you feeling?
Man, I'm feeling great. After day 1, I mean, it was phenomenal. Had a great time, and now I'm just excited for this day.
And we just left Cleveland State. I mean, I just got to talk about this. This is one thing that hasn't really been marketed heavy on our team. But we welcomed over 300 students to the conference this year, guys. 300 high school students. So we just left Cleveland State University. They have a pitch competition, 150. We got them hyped. Trey, always does his thing, but I brought my nephew. That was a personal story to bring my nephew, 14 years old, and the whole time he was hyping me up on the way here. I'm like, you are excited, sir. I haven't saw that type of energy, and that's what we're doing with Futureland. So that's a personal, just heart moment for me to bring my nephew here. Again, growing up in the city of Cleveland and seeing this happen on this stage, it's a full circle for all of us, all the investments of generations here to be here now with Futureland. I mean, we're doing it.
We can't talk about the future without bringing up the youth. And that's why we're all here, because we're changing the trajectory of their lives. We are making a shift right here. And we're just glad to have you all a part of it. This is only year 2. And we're casting vision. We're thinking about the next 10 years from now, how this is going to look, 20 years down the line. And we need all of you to be a part of it. And so we're just very thankful that you're here. And we're excited. We got some big things planned for y'all today.
Yesterday was so lit. And people wasn't lining up this morning because we went hard all day yesterday.
Yeah, we went
What
hard.
Was your favorite thing yesterday, Trey?
Mine definitely was the music panel. Not gonna lie, with some heavy hitters on stage, and me, being in that field as well. I learned so much, even how music is changing, how tech is changing the music industry, and that's so connected to the youth. So that was really, really big for me.
Yeah, one of my favorite things, we did a live podcast upstairs. We interviewed different special guest speakers. So it was kind of my intimate moment, getting to know some of the speakers more. We did 7 interviews in about 2 hours live on the radio. And it was just so amazing to hear their stories, people coming here and investing in this vision of Cleveland. But I can't go without saying about the evening activities. We were turned up at the UBF after party, VIP. We were just vibing all night.
That dude, Harold Lilly, killed it.
We was dancing.
Unbelievable time. But today is about to be
even better.
We're going to a new level. Yeah, Futureland is going to the next level. We're grateful that y'all be a part of it. And now, without further ado, we want to introduce, the narrator, moderator of the next panel that's coming up. Quinton Stewart from Google, and he is bringing our own Mayor Bibb, and also Mayor Lucas is coming to the stage. So I want y'all to give a loud round of applause for Mayor Bibb and Mayor Lucas.
Thank you, guys.
We'll be in the middle. There you go.
Hey! Are you good? You good?
I love you too.
That's how we know
Y'all enjoying Futureland?
Yeah.
Hey.
That's good. I know Mayor Bibb's at home, but can we show some love for Mayor Lucas too?
How y'all doing? Kansas City in the house.
I want to quickly brag on Mayor Lucas, by the way. Mayor Lucas just got reelected to a second term to lead Kansas City.
Thank you.
He now has the big, bold task of managing Kansas City now with Taylor Swift taking over.
Yes.
We have all become Swifties somehow.
Real quick.
I don't know much about it, but I'm learning.
But this is Travis Kelce's hometown, man. So welcome to Kelsey Land.
Hey.
Welcome to Kelsey Land.
And I was just going to ask as a first question, do you mayors ever talk after the game?
Yeah.
I know y'all
yes.
played in August, and I think there was a 1-point difference in August. Did y'all text each other after the game or?
So, we save our fun for postseason, big regular season games.
Got it.
But I believe the Browns had a very good win week 1. I texted them after that.
You did?
And we stay in touch on a lot of stuff. All of the accomplishments that you all have had in Cleveland are things that I'm watching, I'm noticing. I'm often jealous of Mayor Bibb because I used to be like the young, cool new mayor. Then y'all elected him. And he's younger and cooler and all that. But no, we talk all the time, and it's been a good joy for me.
Got it. You still young and cool. Don't listen to the haters.
As some of y'all may know, once you have kids, it starts to feel like it changes.
and congratulations on your
you.
first. I know that when you really loved that moment. I remember when you first shared it on social media. I was like, oh, congratulations, Mayor. And I've known Mayor Lucas and actually Mayor Bibb before they became mayors of their city. And so just to see the trajectory they've been on, and then also in their personal life, how things have grown for them. It's just been really amazing to be a part of some of those moments. And so, it's great to be on stage with y'all. Now as mayors, and I'm with Google, Quinton Stewart again, and we're just so happy to be here and share some time in Cleveland with folks invested in seeing tech grow in Cleveland. And I think that Mayor Lucas is here because tech should grow around the Midwest. The tech sector should grow around the Midwest. And I've got a couple questions here today to help, talk about this talk about this topic a little bit more. And I know that Telianje, who we've worked with, will be fielding some questions afterwards for folks to submit to the app, and then they'll get answered between today and over the next couple of days. And then I know that these mayors will also be around. I know Mayor Bibb lives here, so you'll see him all the time. And so please direct some of the questions that you have directly towards these two brothers when you see them, walking around here following this session. But let's get into it because I know that we're a little short on time. So I know that you both want Cleveland and Kansas City to become destinations for the tech sector. But I'd like to know, because I know, we were talking in the back, and I know you've been to New York and you've been to a couple other cities and to a couple of convenings where I think this has been a topic. I know that you've lent your perspective, and then you've heard from others who've been successful in this space talk about what makes a successful tech economy. Can you talk to us a little bit about what you think makes a successful tech economy and what you both are doing to prepare your cities for the growth in this sector?
Yeah, I can kick it off. One of the things that we often fantasize about when we have this conversation about the future of technology and the future of entrepreneurship is we think we can just build it overnight.
Yeah.
And that's not the case. When you look at the trajectory of Silicon Valley was not utopia immediately.
Yeah.
It was a small little sleepy suburb, roughly 40 miles south of San Francisco. And what made Silicon Valley work and be prosperous was the fact that you had talented people who took big, bold bets, and they were risk takers.
Right.
That's what made Silicon Valley work and happen. And Cleveland has that same history and heritage. Folks forget that the world's first billionaire, John D. Rockefeller, got started in Cleveland. But a bank denied him a loan, so he went to New York. Mm-hmm. We missed that moment. And so what we're trying to do in Cleveland with opportunities like Futureland is really change our relationship with risk-taking as a city. For a long time, it was a panacea to be a failure in this town. I think failing is good. And if we don't have that kind of entrepreneurial mindset, we won't be able to reach our potential as a city in terms of being a tech hub long term.
The number one thing that I would say that's important for us as we become tech centers is talent. How do we attract it, but also how do we retain it? If there was a shortcoming of when I was growing up, in Kansas City, we usually talked about some of the few big companies we have, and any city of a certain size will. Our biggest company is actually Hallmark greeting cards. And even when I was a kid, I was like, I don't know what the long-term business model is. Now, it turns out they just make Christmas movies all the time now, so they're doing all right. But it is important for us to look at how can we support entrepreneurs. A big part of that is making sure that there are not just events like this, there is support. We've gone to the legislature in both my own state of Missouri and neighboring state Kansas to make sure that angel investor credits are the sorts of things that are supported and exist here, or there rather. And then more than anything, I think it is us spending that same type of energy and investment that we do on gigantic industrial incentivized real estate incentives on people. If you go to a lot of American cities, we have tax increment financing, we have so many tools to help somebody build a 40-story building. But if you are actually building companies that will take up half a floor within that building and actually fill it up, we don't have enough for you. So for us, the goal is reorienting what business attraction looks like, reorienting what incentives look like, and instead of saying, we're all gonna try to pitch for the next big factory with 4,000 jobs, which, to be quite honest, just aren't getting built the same way they did before, instead saying, what if we support 4,000 entrepreneurs in our community to do that same thing?
Wonderful. And on the Google side, we think that data is also key in the equation, especially when you're talking about a more inclusive tech sector as well. So while, you talked about how to grow it, we want to know how to make sure while there's growth, how does it, maintain, or how do we create diversity in that space? And, what we believe is that data can lead to stopping racial injustice and making the job market more fair. So especially when it's in the hands of community leaders who advocate on behalf of community needs, we definitely believe that, actually this is specific to Cleveland, and this is something that happened pretty recently that you were a part of. You attended last week's Center for Economic Inclusion's Wealth Gap convening alongside Team NEO, the National Urban League, Goodwill, and your very own Cleveland Cavaliers, which I know you're a big fan of. You also play a lot of basketball. Really good. But Google is thrilled to be supporting the center's expansion to Northeast Ohio with a $1 million grant, which they'll be using to generate data and insights on the steps that government, businesses, and community leaders can take to strengthen Cleveland's economy and make it more economically inclusive. So, while we think that data plays a major role, I want to know why you went last week to support this initiative, support their leadership. And ultimately, I think, bring the findings and use the findings to help, really Cleveland's tech sector grow in a more diverse way. Why were you there?
Well, this is personal for me. I'm the youngest Black mayor in Cleveland's history, and we are a majority Black city. And if Black people aren't thriving, if Black people aren't getting good contracts, if Black people aren't building wealth, then our city's long-term potential won't be realized. And as Mayor Bloomberg once said, you can't manage what you can't measure. So it's so important for us as local elected officials to make sure we're making the right investments, make sure we're holding the private sector accountable to do their fair share, but also bring residents along in the process. That's why I'm so excited about the work we're doing in the Southeast side, a part of the city where I was born and raised. This is a part of Cleveland that has historically been disenfranchised because of racism, redlining, and a lack of real energy and focus in terms of caring about Black people in our city. The fact that in that part of the city, their housing values have not gone up since the Great Recession in 2008 is immoral, in my opinion. And so it's our responsibility as mayors to really incentivize the private sector to make the right investments, to ensure that we give our residents the tool not only build back the block, but buy back the block as well too, because that's how you create real long-term wealth.
And I think a lot of, what we think about, both you as mayors and also people who live here in Cleveland, is the next generation. Yep. So how are we preparing them to buy back the block? How are we preparing them to take advantage of jobs at Google, jobs at Microsoft, jobs at startups that come to Cleveland and Kansas City? Do you have a plan in mind for that? And this is for both of you.
A few things. So first of all, I want to underscore something that the mayor said, because every now and then I'll be in rooms and I don't know if people get how important what he said and noted of building up our Black community and Black people in our cities are. I went to college in St. Louis, Missouri, a city with some similar demographics to Cleveland, right? I spent time in Detroit. If you think about the states of Michigan and Missouri and Ohio, if those cities are not succeeding, the states are not succeeding. And the city is not succeeding unless a core of our community and our population are succeeding. So even if you are somebody who exists in suburbs far, far away or far, far out in the state, We will only be successful until we make sure our Black communities in the core of our cities are strong and that opportunities are being felt and grown inside all of them. So one thing on how we actually make sure that we are building that opportunity for people to invest back in their communities is you need to tell them they're welcome. I'll give an example. One of the reasons I actually ran for mayor was in Kansas City, and this is with respect to everybody who preceded me. But every time, and maybe y'all have lived in cities like this where they're like, we got a new thing that's gonna fix everything, right? We're gonna have like the Kansas City experience. We're gonna build like a thing. It's gonna bring all these people. It's gonna be great. And I would always sit back and say, they're not building that for me. And they're really not building that for people who are from the neighborhoods I grew up in. So the first thing that we have to do is to make sure that as you are talking about building big, bold, new things, talk to the people who live here. Visit with the young people who are in our high schools today and our middle schools, telling them about opportunities. And more than anything, and this is why I mentioned retention before. You can't, and it has broken my heart over the years. I went back to Kansas City as a lawyer at first, and there was a talented sister and all of that, and I saw her just struggle with the law firm, with all these others, because they were just saying, well, you just don't seem to fit in. And she's like, I'm from here. I'm proud of who I am. You need to understand how to talk to me, how to visit with us, how to make sure that this is a place that is truly open and welcoming. And so for me, I don't think it's actually the hardest convincing job to tell people or to advise them or give them leads how to invest back in their communities. But let's be real. If the banking institution, for example, that my city has been banking with for 110 years, still almost never provides loans in the historically Black community, which they don't. If most of our large companies, including the aforementioned greeting card company, by the way, don't let the mahogany cards fool you, but if they don't actually make sure that they're creating enough opportunities, right, hiring, recruiting, retaining of people in our community, that's where we need to make noise. And because I think if people see that they can stay where they are, they can invest in their community, and they can succeed, they will invest there. If, however, they're like, you know what? I can't make it here. I need to go to DC. I need to go to New York, California, what have you. Then they will. And so for us, I think it's really how do we show that they are welcome? How do we make sure they know they're invested in?
And I want to pick up on a point that Mayor Lucas mentioned. You know, talent in our cities is equally distributed. We have God-given talent walking our streets every single day, but opportunity is not. And the problem we have right now is we have an education system that does not open up the eyes to our young people about what they can achieve earlier enough. I want us to build more business owners earlier on, but we can't wait to teach them in high school. We got to teach them in middle school. And we got to expose them early on as well too, because in our community, you are what you see. And so if we don't reach back and show them they could be a mayor, a lawyer, a Rich Paul, then we aren't doing our jobs. And we all have a responsibility to do that.
Absolutely. And, you know, you all made some amazing points about the next generation. But you also, you know, said something that struck me, which, you know, was, you know, the talk of factories. And we know that, like you just said, those aren't being built at the same rate they were historically, or maybe even not being built at all.
Yep.
Really? So what do we do for the folks who used to work in those factories as well? So we talked about the next generation, but what do we do about my parents' generation who doesn't have that factory job anymore and needs to be reskilled to take advantage of these opportunities that I know you all are pitching for both of your cities? Do you have a plan for that? Is it possible?
I'd argue that it's changing for a couple reasons. One, what we saw during the pandemic was this idea that we can't, as a nation, for us to be competitive, keep sending jobs and goods overseas. For us to be competitive, we need to build things in America once again. And we're trying to build things in Cleveland and Ohio once again as well too. And so we want to take this legacy, heritage, and history we have in manufacturing and really be a global leader in smart manufacturing for the 21st century. So what we did, because of this president who actually cares and believes in American cities like Cleveland and Kansas City, we took $50 million of American Rescue Plan funds, and we looked at 1,000 acres of brownfield land we have in our city, primarily located on the east side. And we're going to take that 1,000 acres of vacant brownfield land and turn them into shovel-ready sites to create and attract those factories to come back to the urban core of our city. That's how we remake an American legacy city in the Midwest once again, because the American industrial policy is aligned to the strengths of our cities.
Absolutely.
In Cleveland and Kansas City, respectively. But we have to be competitive, and we have to make sure we have the right economic tools to attract and retain those companies in our respective economies.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I would say this, the foundations of why communities like ours grew haven't gone away.
Yeah.
Right? My city is in the middle of the country, which maybe you think is interesting, maybe you think you don't, but it means that if you are talking about transportation, logistics, any number of things, it's still coming through here.
Yeah.
And what we need to make sure we do, as you are seeing, and I agree with Mayor Bibb on this, as you are seeing a change in how things are produced and get to people, that we are in a position to compete for. We are in a position to make sure that those are the sorts of opportunities that go to cities, that those aren't the sorts of things that are just going to ex-urban or rural areas. Sometimes you need to talk with or fight with people in state leadership. You know, I was in Kansas. That's again, state I don't live in, but live next to. And Garmin, if any of y'all work out and have the fancy watches and all of that, wonderful company. They're about an hour outside of Kansas City, visiting with their leadership, and they said, hey, Mayor, can you build your new train line out here to the suburbs? And I said, I'll run y'all. You're in a different state and all of that. I'm like, why didn't you think to build in the core? And they said, well, in the 80s and the 90s, the whole play was to get far away, right, to try to get all these campuses in space, but it turns out we still need people.
Yeah.
Right.
And they all still need people.
Right.
And so I think what we need to do in more situations is say, yeah, we've got people. We've got very talented people.
Yep.
Some of whom new to the workforce, some of whom have been working in the workforce 20, 30 years. But these are talented folks who, by the way, are often very skilled already, particularly those who have been in the workforce. And to say, this is where we need to build and build up opportunities. One other thing, and I'll talk about this I'll make the comparison to supermarkets and grocery stores. When I was growing up, right, they were getting rid of all kind of the smaller grocery stores. You just have big giant ones. And that's, you know, kind of how we lived. But now there's a trend to go back to neighborhood markets and neighborhood stores and all of that. You can see that sometimes in other areas. And so making sure that when we're talking about production, it isn't just necessarily hitting for the biggest factory possible, but also ensuring that we are producing goods that are at factory levels that are either very large, or medium sized, or sometimes more pinpointed in fleet manufacturing, and getting that work done. Final point on this, I was in Portland not too long ago, visiting with Mercedes-Benz truck division. They have an outstanding factory, not their biggest around, but their most elite vehicles are made actually in Portland, Oregon, something I didn't know. And much of the rhetoric is we build our giant factories in the South, we do all of that, but for some of their most important vehicles with the most expensive machinery, they're still going to this place that isn't huge, but has the best talent. That's the sort of work that I think we need to do in our next generation of attraction and manufacturing in this country.
And the other thing I would say is we have to start to have an honest conversation with employers about changing their requirements, not undermining the requirements or the quality of the requirements, but changing their requirements. You know, you hear from CEOs all the time, I can't find good people, I can't find talent. But I mean, when you look at the job requirements, they make no sense. They want 3 years of experience. In finance, for example, I know a whole lot of single mothers who have a lot more ways of how to manage a budget than somebody with an MBA.
That's right.
And I got an MBA myself, right? And so we got to think differently about the lived experience people are bringing to bear to these organizations, and think about talent differently to actually solve these problems in a structural way.
And to that point about not needing an MBA
Yeah.
to manage your finances or to ultimately be successful. I don't have an MBA. No, I'm just kidding. But When you think about startups in the tech space as well, do you believe in that notion? Do you believe that, the barrier to entry may be much lower, if you want to, create a startup in tech? And if so, is Kansas City and Cleveland a good environment for startups to grow and thrive? Do they need to go to Silicon Valley to become the next Apple, or to become the next Google, or to become the next, Uber? Or can they do it right in Cleveland and Kansas City and enjoy the Chiefs and go to Cavs games? Can they do that?
I mean, absolutely they can. Absolutely you can. What we need to do, and I think what we are here talking about today, is how do we build a world and an ecosystem that supports them and can build a critical mass of folks who are in the same space. Because you are absolutely right. The amount of talent that is walking around our communities each day, the brilliant people that are coming out of our universities, our high schools, on our streets, are the sorts of things that tell me that yes, you absolutely can. So you do not. I think what we have to diagnose, though, is why does someone go somewhere else? Well, there are a few different reasons. One, this isn't necessarily the place to talk about it, but if you don't feel accepted and welcome where you are because of race, background, orientation, anything like that, you're gonna go. And we push out of our part of the country talent like that all the time. But on another step, if you actually are building a community where you're saying we're here to welcome all and lowering those barriers to entry. When I went to college, it was the first time in my life I feel like I ever really got to know some people where I'm like, man, y'all really have money, right? Because they're like, yeah, my parents bought my car, gave me a loan, did whatever. And then I got out of college and like, my parents bought my house or my condo or did whatever. And I'm like, what? That exists? I didn't even know. And so when you have a set of people who can get an interest-free $100,000, $200,000 loan, and you're somebody with an idea and you don't even know where to start, that's a lot of the work that we're trying to change. That's what innovative cities are doing. And I do commend the president and our Congress, at least part of it, for making sure that we have the opportunity to have funding, because in our city, we have stood up more opportunities for investing from our Economic Development Corporation for entrepreneurs. We are standing up more areas where those folks who need loans that range between $50,000 to $250,000 are getting the support that they need. I mean, that is the sort of work and the bridge that I think we need to provide to fill it. But yes, and here's the other point I make on that. If we don't, what Mayor Bibb said before exists, that we have all these talented people who can never get to those opportunities. So for me, it is imperative, not that we build a pipeline to Silicon Valley, Boston, New York City, anything like that, but that we're actually creating more talent and opportunities, not just for our cities, but for our country long term.
Absolutely.
Yeah, if I were creating a startup right now, let me tell you why I would choose Cleveland. First and foremost, I'd want to minimize my expenses as much as possible. And Cleveland is a great city in terms of cost of living, whether it be housing or hiring good quality talent. It's just a great investment in that standpoint. Secondly, we sit on 20% of the world's fresh water with Lake Erie and the Great Lakes. And water is going to be the new oil. And that's going to be our competitive advantage for the future. Thirdly, world-class university. You can't have a great American city without a best-in-class public research and private research universities. We have two in Cleveland State University and Case Western. And then from our geographic proximity, I can be in New York in an hour and 10 minutes. I can be in DC in an hour, Atlanta in an hour and a half, LA in 5 hours, right? And have a nice little apartment in the second largest theater district in the country, right in Playoff Square. Pretty good life as an entrepreneur, in my opinion, right?
And to get a little bit more Cleveland specific, because I know we got a lot of people in the building who live in Cleveland, from Cleveland, and we got a couple folks who travel from out of town, and as this conference continues to grow, we'll see more folks traveling from out of town. But have there been any programs, and this is for you, Mayor Bibb, that you were specifically proud of that are really helping to grow and progress the startup community here in Cleveland? Because, I feel like there's some startup founders in the room. If you're a startup founder, please raise your hand. Yes, y'all are in the building. I know that they are constantly meeting with investors. Yeah, shout out to y'all. big and small, y'all are constantly meeting with investors. But I don't know if many startup founders are hearing from elected officials or connecting with them on the regular, maybe, the way I do. Are there any programs that you can share with them that you're aware of?
We're sitting in it right now.
Right.
Futureland,
Absolutely.
right? One of the things that I recognized before I became mayor was there is so much damn talent in this town, especially diverse talent. But we didn't have a space for us to network, fellowship, organize, and share ideas. A space that felt like it was for the culture, built by us and for us. And that's really the genesis of Futureland. And I think if you build that connectivity, it'll not only help strengthen the ecosystem, but helps change the brand and narrative that you can be an entrepreneur that's from Cleveland, that you don't have to leave, that you can build your dreams and build your business right in your hometown. And that's really the goal of Futureland long term.
Absolutely. And shout out to Teleandre and her team for really making this special. I think this is year 2. And to see the growth, I think I had our first conversation with her a year ago and with you about Futureland. And I thought it was amazing. And to be here in person, this year, it's really beautiful in reality. And just on the note of startup founders, Google for Startup, we have a department at Google called Google for Startups. And we are trying to make sure that the startup space is more diverse by providing $100,000 in financing, and let me not say financing, in grant dollars. These are non-equity dollars. We are not taking a stake in your company. But if accepted into the program, you get $100,000 and wraparound services as well to help with some of the growth expectations that you have for your company. So please look into Google for Startups. And then we have even something more specific called Google Black Founders Fund, which does the same thing. But if you can hear from the title, it is specifically focused on helping founders from African-American communities. So please look into that. I believe applications are still open. I hope next year I can bring the head of that department, because I think that is, that's one of the best opportunities we have to, really help startups grow under the, I don't want to say under the Google umbrella, but with the Google resources and intellectual capital at your, at your disposal. But moving on to the next question, and this is a city. This is a city-related question, and I'm thinking about your day-to-day, and how you manage your cities. You were just reelected, so I'm thinking you're doing a good job. No, I'm just kidding. I know you're doing a good job, right? Yeah, he just got reelected, so I know he's doing a good job. In the future, we got something. I think the city is going to be supporting you in the future, because I know that you're doing great work. 2025. Can you talk to us a little bit about how tech plays a role in day-to-day? In your day-to-day work, and how you connect with constituents and ensure that they're really set up best for success.
Yeah, a few different things about tech. It's inseparable in how you run a city. Now, you were talking about data before, for example. How can we deliver services well? How do we make sure what we are providing is being accessed by people is a key part of it? And then how do you communicate as well? There's a very talented mayor of Pittsburgh, Ed Gainey, who was talking about downtown redevelopment. And he actually had said recently that, we can give y'all all the data about how safe it is, all that sort of stuff, but there's a group of people that are always going to say it's not. And so what I took from that is data can be a helpful tool, technology can be a helpful tool, but you always need to utilize it to communicate with people. You always have to be meeting people and reaching them. I think an era that probably went the wrong way about a decade ago, if you were in the city business, I was on city council, then. A lot of people were talking about, I mean this with great respect to anybody who was involved in it, how do we make our cities smarter? How do we do this, that, or the other? And so in my city, let me tell you what we do. We put up a bunch of kiosks all around downtown. All of them are broken now. They just had screens. We never even put enough advertising on them. And I remember even at the time, as soon as I got elected, I started voting against it. Not because I hate it, right? But it would always be, I got elected at 30 to city council. And, people who are double my age would say, this is the new way to communicate. I'm like, people are looking at their phones, not actually necessarily looking at what you're putting on the screen while they're coming by, particularly in a place like Kansas City where we're in vehicles. So what are we doing to try to reach them in a different way? And so for me, tech broadly and the industry means a few different things. One is we've already talked about a true growth area in industry, right? We have a Ford and a GM plant. I don't know if they're growing bigger. We're fighting for electric vehicles nearby, but if we don't have that, right, I got to think of another path. As Hallmark that I mentioned before, it moves into more of a media company than a factory producing greeting cards. How do I do something different? So tech is an area that is very interesting for growth. But then in how we utilize it, how do we make sure that we are communicating with our constituents so they can get the best delivered services in the best way? One final point on that. I was at a school yesterday, and I was talking about technology in the classroom. They were using some other type of tablet. It wasn't a Google tablet, but they'll know better next time. But I was saying, what do you do with it? And one of the teachers was saying, we got all of them, but we don't even know what we're doing with them now, right? That's a problem. What we need to make sure that we're doing as we talk about buzzwords, investments, and beyond is still always see how do we have people who are trained how to use it? How do we make sure that we're training folks to interact with it? How do we take data from it to make sure that it's making our communities better? And part of that is every day of our lives, while we're dealing with issues as mayors relating to public safety, road infrastructure, water, natural disasters, climate sustainability, and beyond. Tech is going to be a part of it, but making sure we utilize it well in the future of the American city and government broadly is probably where the key challenge is.
Yeah, look, we were almost 30 years behind when I took office in terms of technology internally at City Hall. We didn't have a new website since 2001, I believe. We just got a new one a couple months ago, by the way. It's a big deal, huge deal. And I remember waiting to get my email account set up when I was sworn in, and it took me 2 days to get my email set up at City Hall. And then when I was visiting all the departments, most of our departments were still on Windows 8, 9, and 10. Now they're all on Microsoft 365, right? And so we can't expect to have a modern response to City Hall that's innovative, that's dynamic, that's meeting the basic needs of our residents if I'm not giving all of our employees the tools they need to make that happen. And so we are working around the clock to do that internally. But externally, during the pandemic, Cleveland was ranked the least connected city in the nation. The least connected in the nation. And just last week, we passed legislation to have a $20 million investment to make sure that up to 50,000 families in our city will now have access to high-speed broadband. Huge. Then we're not done yet, because I want to beat Columbus and Cincinnati and Pittsburgh and Kansas City in the future, by the way.
I like it.
We have also attracted a $500 million capital investment to lay fiber in every part in our city, from Lee Harvard to West Park, because there's probably a young kid on Kinsman who wants to have an amazing AI company. Now, when that kid leaves the CMSD High School and goes off to Case Western or Cleveland State, that young kid can say, I can start my business right in the Southeast side because our city cared about me. That's how we change the game for the next generation.
And I think that you both love it. We all love the friendly competition because it's only going to benefit the folks in this audience, right? Of course. It's going to benefit the folks in this audience and the folks at home in Kansas City. And on my, with my last question, we got about 30 seconds, in that same vein of competition. Just want to know who's going to win the Super Bowl. Is going to be the Browns or the Chiefs?
Well,
I don't know.
I ain't gonna
Yeah,
say
I
nothing.
live in Chicago. I live in Chicago. We just won our first game since like 1995, and so we're not in y'all position. But I want to know, let me.
I'm just praying Travis gets married, so that he might,
that might be y'all Super Bowl.
might be a Super Bowl.
The Travis Kelce Taylor Swift wedding in Cleveland. That'd be big.
That'd be great.
That'd be big.
Hopefully, we both get the invite.
That's exactly right. Let me tell y'all this, because I flew in last night, got here about 1 a.m. It's been beautiful during my time here. And I was reading a lot of news stories, right? And there are some Ohio politicians that are trying to take over Speaker of the House, some other stuff, which pains me. And whenever I sit on a stage with Justin Bibb, and I know he's got work he's going to do in Cleveland and that sort of thing, but you have one of the most talented mayors in the country. And yes. And I say that, I talked to all of the different mayors. I've met with all of them, so it's an honor to be in your community. I'm excited to see the growth, the new website. That's wild right there. And the old Windows systems. But, the other thing that we don't say enough is that we don't know everything. And there was a question before about engaging with the tech community. Teach us, talk to us, reach out to us, communicate with us, because sometimes there are things you know and that you are experiencing that may not be something that is immediately on our radar. Those of you who are trying and who are in the industry are truly the ones who are leaders, so we welcome your feedback anytime along the way. And by the way, if you ever want to make money, start a company, you're always welcome in Kansas City.
Stop that.
Thank you.
Stop that.
Hey. One more time for these two brothers leading dynamic cities. This is really a blessing. And, this is really a blessing, you all, to have these two brothers in the building. Please, like they said, give them a shout. Holla at them when you see them in the lobby area. These are very accessible brothers. They have on suits, and I do not.
I forgot my time.
And I do not, but don't let the suits fool you. They are really, really into making sure that Cleveland and Kansas City is a better place for their residences. So please give them one more round of applause. Thank y'all so much for attending this morning.